guys. All right, I want to go over just a couple problems from your quiz. These were the most commonly missed ones, and so if you missed them especially, make sure you listen up, but for everyone, it's just a good review because our test is coming up later this week, and so this would be a good way to study and prepare is to look at the mistakes you made on the quiz. So the first one that I want to talk about really quick is 1 and 2. It asked you to find the square roots. That's plural. So remember, the square roots of 121 would be plus or minus 11. It could be positive 11 or negative 11. So if it asks for both roots, you always want to make sure that you give both those roots. The next one that I want to look at is number 6. A lot of you on number 6 wrote an expression instead of an equation, and it asked you to write an equation. Now, this one was worth 2 points, and so if you wrote an expression that worked, I still gave you 1 point if you wrote one that simplified, but it wanted you to write an equation, which means it needs to have an equal sign, and it said it had to have at least 2 steps. Now, of course, there's an infinite amount of answers. I've made up one here that works, and let me show you why it works. So I would start this problem by adding 5. That gives me 2x squared equals 200. I'm going to divide by 2. I get x squared equals 100. I'm going to take the square root of each, and that would give me that plus or minus 10 when I take the square root of 100. Basically, you need an equation that ends up with x squared equals 100 so that when you take the square root, you get plus or minus 10. So just make sure there that you had an equation and not an expression. All right, the next one I want to look at real quick is number 10. A lot of you got started correctly, but you just did not have it fully simplified. So I do want to break 45 into the square root of 9 and the square root of 5, and then I have the square root of x there. And on the bottom, I have the square root of 144. Well, the square root of 9 is 3, so I have 3 times the square root of 5x over 12. And a lot of you stopped there, which this is accurate, but it is not completely simplified. Because remember, if there are things on the outside of the radical sign, like this 3 and 12, we can simplify those if they're able to be simplified, and 3 and 12 are, because 3 goes into 12 4 times. So this should really be 1 times the square root of 5x over 4, or you could even get rid of that 1 and just say the square root of 5x over 4. And I would take it either of these 2 ways. But again, if there's things outside the radical signs that can be simplified, they need to. And this was the mistake that some of you made on number 12 as well. So if you missed that one, maybe go back and look and see if you had not completely simplified it. The next one we're going to look at is number 16. It asks you to name an irrational number between the rational numbers 3 and 4. So remember, for it to be irrational, it has to be a decimal that goes on forever, it never ends, it never repeats. Some of you are writing things such as 3.572, and then you're putting a ... Well, that does show that it goes on forever, but that's not an irrational number because we can't show all the numbers that go on forever. So this would not work as a way to write an irrational number. Here's a better way to think about it. 3 could also be written as the square root of 9, 4 as the square root of 16. And so if I were to pick any square root between 10 and 15, so the square root of 10, or the square root of 11, or the square root of 12, or the square root of 13, or 14, or 15, any of those square roots, that would end up between 3 and 4. It would be 3 point something. So those would be great answers to choose. In this one, some of you actually already figured out that you could also say pi, because pi is an irrational number that happens to be between 3 and 4. And so in this one, that did work. Just be careful, because obviously if I had given you, I'd asked for an irrational number between 9 and 10, well then pi would not work, or 11 and 12, pi would not work. So it's best to think about it in terms of what are the perfect squares and then picking the square root of something in between those perfect squares. And on the last page, number 19, it says a computer monitor screen is measured by the length of the diagonal. Some of you drew pictures, which I thought was a really good idea of a way to visualize this. So if a computer screen is measured by its diagonal, it says a 19-inch monitor is about 12 inches high. Well, 19 is that diagonal length because it says in the first sentence that a computer monitor screen is measured by the length of the diameter. And so then you here were finding the length of the leg. And some of you found the length of the hypotenuse. You made 19 the leg, but 19 is actually the hypotenuse. So for those of you who made a mistake on that one, hopefully my picture helps you understand that better. And the last one, number 20, the key here was the last sentence that asked you what is the perimeter of the rink. Some of you found the length of one side by finding the square root, but did not find the perimeter. And remember, you can find the perimeter of a square by adding up all the sides or by taking whatever the side length is and multiplying it by 4. So just make sure on 20 that you completed the problem. All right, so those were the most commonly missed ones. If you missed another one or have another question, please reach out to me through email or with our Zoom office hours from 2 to 2:50 each day, because I would love to help you. And as I tell you every time, the quiz is a great opportunity to learn from your mistakes before the test. So make sure you understand what you missed and why so that you don't make the same mistakes. Thanks.